Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Today I'm talking with James Fricker. Welcome, James. Also joining me from tomorrow. I love the fact that the world is a big place. How are you
Yeah,
today? How are you this morning? How are you tomorrow?
yeah, I'm very good, thanks, Craig. It's great to be on here, and yeah, tomorrow is is a great day, so I'm excited for you to experience it as well. I'm loving that running thread that's going through
Yeah.
now.
We have a mutual friend who was just on my show, and I think just recently on your show too, Adam
That's right.
Ashton. And he and I did the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is still new to me talking to people around the world. I'm a digital import.
Yeah,
Um, anyway, we do a little conversation beforehand, and I think the thread that piques my interest is to talk about there's different media. So when James and I say we're a podcaster, it's like, and all the podcasters do the same thing. Do we mean audio only? Do we do YouTube? Is it video? Do we make videograms, or they call them audiograms? Make little video clips
Mm,
that are faux jumping equalizer bars with audio on it, so that we can stuff audio. Like all these complexities about the media that we choose to create our work in. And I'm wondering, how do you how do you decide like where to draw the line? So at some point you have to just be like, yeah, I'm done with this episode, because
mm,
and I myself, you could spend forever. You could just be like, oh, I'll do this, and then I'll make a jump cut, and then and I'm gonna. Oh, this reminds me, I'll pull these two together, and it just gets nuts. So,
mm.
how do you figure out? Okay, I have wrung enough juice out of this lovely grapefruit. I've gotten something meaningful from it, and now I'm going to put it down. Like, how do you make that decision?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question because I think certainly, like you said, you can get really in the weeds a little bit with, you can do this and this, and then there's, I can have, like we were saying before, you can have the clips of the episode around. You can like turn the episode into like a blog post. You can post it here. There's all the different kinds of social media. Like, why don't we change the video into portrait mode? Then I can have a TikTok. You know.
I want a transcript underneath this. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so you can do all that stuff, and I think it's certainly overwhelming, especially if you're someone that's just doing it yourself, and like even myself, I work full time, and then the podcast is a side thing, right? So it's never going to be. I'm not really going to have enough time, really, ever, to do all this stuff. Like, it's going to have to be, I need someone to help or do this or do that. But I think one thing that helps with this, I think, is having the regular cadence of episodes. Just because so for myself, my podcast is called Graduate Theory, and it comes out every Tuesday morning, and I think that helps me with with the sort of max work that I can do
Hmm.
in a certain amount of time, and so that kind of, well, like,
Stuck on the tracks, and the train is coming. We will be done by
yeah,
Tuesday, right?
yeah, exactly. So there's like a clear cutoff, and it kind of ends up being roughly the same. Like, some episodes I'll manage to do more, where I'll be like, oh yeah, well, maybe we can do this, or like, yeah, we'll do that. A few extra
Hmm.
things. Like, I have a newsletter that goes out with each episode, so you can subscribe on the website to it. And sometimes, like, my write ups, for example, will be a bit longer if I have more time
Hmm.
and I can go into a bit more depth, or sometimes they'll be a bit shorter. Sometimes maybe I'll try and do some clips on LinkedIn through the week, because LinkedIn's quite relevant to my audience, and then kind of just I did Instagram for a while as well, but I just found, and there's even tools. I'm trying to remember. There was one that I used. It was called Repurpose. And so
Hmm.
the way the tool worked was that you could post a YouTube video. Well, this is the way. I think there's multiple ways you could have set it up, but I would post a YouTube clip. So this would be like a sub 1 minute clip, and then it would post it on LinkedIn and on Instagram.
Hmm.
From the same, it would just take the YouTube clip, convert it into a portrait thing, add like
Right.
my chosen, like, how those clips, they have the sort of middle video, then up the top it's like the title, and at the
Hmm.
bottom is the subtitles. So it would do all that stuff. But I just found, people weren't really paying attention. They've seen like this, literally the same format of a clip, like
I know
that many
what you mean.
times.
I found
Yeah.
that it gets worse. I don't know. I'm hoping you haven't had this experience, but it gets worse when the stuff kind of works. Like,
Yeah.
I have one of my shows, not this show, but another one of my shows is called Movers Mindset, and we've been going for 5 years and 120, I don't know, coming up 130 episodes. It's enormous. And every once in a while, I used to get around to making little videogram, 10-second. It's just an audio highlight of the guest, dropping the truth bombs, and it's
Mhm.
little jumping bars. And I'd put it in Instagram, and like 50 people would immediately download the episode. And I'm like, well, I guess I should be
Wow.
doing that more often. So like, I think it would
Yeah.
be better if I did it and nobody cared. I'd be like,
Mm,
yes, okay, that's a waste of time. But when you
yeah.
try something that
Right.
kind of like, well, this is cool, and then people respond, you're like, oh, that maybe I should
Yeah.
keep doing that. So it makes it worse.
Mm,
Um, so I think that's important, for us. I want to make this sound
yeah.
like we're doing like really important work here, but it's important for us to talk about. Yeah, these problems are real. Like there's information overload. Um, the people who are not technologically savvy, if only I was wordically savvy, people who aren't technologically savvy have to also like, yeah, and this stuff is hard. I mean, you strike me as the kind of guy like this stuff isn't that hard. It's like click, 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 and away we go.
Yeah.
But imagine if you had to also figure out how to work
Mm,
YouTube, right? And just be like, oh, this is too much. So I think it's important to be aware of your limits, and to know when you've blown past them,
mm,
and to figure out ways to, all right, this is what I'm doing. So what are you currently finding is the most like the part, I don't want to say the part of your show because it makes it sound like I mean the intro or the middle, but like what
yeah. Yeah.
about your podcast is currently the thing that, you're like looking at the clock at the day job and you're like, I want to get to this part of the thing.
Mm. Yeah, I think there. Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a few different steps that I sort of go through, which are probably quite similar. You creating the cover art, like editing the actual episode, and then creating the newsletter from content in the episode. They're kind of the three pillars. And I think, so like honestly, what gets me like really excited is when I know that I've had a great episode and then I want to go and edit it and almost just re-listen to it while
Mm-hmm.
I'm editing it, and even then like condense down the key points and put it in somewhere that you can go back and read it later. I think that I did an episode recently with this guy called Adam Gahar. He's a real estate investment guy, and he just had so much fantastic advice. And I knew that from when we spoke, our episode was incredible.
Mm.
And like while I was chatting to him, I was like, "Oh my goodness, like this is so great."
You say the meta version of me is behind me going, oh my God, are you hearing this? And I'm like,
Yeah,
shut
yeah,
up. I'm
yeah,
trying to have a
yeah, yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly right. And and then knowing that was sitting there, and then waiting, like, and then I finally got to edit it, and I was like, oh, I get to listen to it again. This is great. And I think that's really good. So I guess editing it is really cool. And like you said before, listening to it and then hearing the guests hit those truth bombs and just being like, damn, that was sick. Like they said something cool there.
We need like I need sign language for like, I need sign language that is a gesture that indicates I'm just pressing stop. That's the end of the show. But oh my God, that was awesome. I love you so much. But I want to
Yeah,
just make a hand gesture so I can just do that. Because I think that'd be
yeah,
a great way to end a show when the guest just says, and here's the best part of the whole thing in the world. And then it just ends. It's like 5 seconds of
yeah.
silence and it ends because we don't need any more of Craig talking about podcasts. What do you think is something that you should be doing? Um, I mean, you can go off on a tangent and have it not be
Mm.
related to podcasting, but I'm thinking related to podcasting. What is something that
Mm.
you should be doing that you're not currently doing?
There's a lot. There's a lot. I think, like you can. I feel like the bubble just keeps on growing. You can just always add more. But I think that myself, the focus really is at the moment. There are a few things like building, like my pipeline or my bank of episodes is
Mm,
something that I'm trying to work on doing. It's been something that I've been trying to do for a while now, and it's just kind of constantly remained between sort of maybe one to, I think I had it out to 4 weeks at one point, um,
mm,
which was great. But ideally, it sort of remains at that length. So that's something that I'm trying to be better at.
mm,
I'd say that, and also posting more regularly on social media, because I think LinkedIn for my podcast is about like early careers and growing your career, and how to do all the things that are associated with that. And so LinkedIn is really the primary place to do social media. So being more active there and posting multiple times a week or whatever it is would be great for my podcast. But yeah, sometimes things are going on and it just
well,
everything
we're
just seems
skipping
to
that
add
part,
up.
right?
Yeah, and
Yeah, I'm
there's
just going to
always the
mark that
things.
done, even though I didn't actually do it.
Yeah,
Go away,
exactly.
check boxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
know
like
that
those things
feeling.
you always want to do them, but then that is the first things off. Like when things,
Yeah.
when everything else is heating up, that is the first things off the block. So yeah, those two things would be things that I want to do more of that
Hmm.
yeah, I
How,
maybe do just enough to keep it going.
yeah. How, this is maybe a little early in the journey, but how will you know when you're done? Like, how do you know which episode is the last one?
I think, yeah, it's a good question, and it's honestly one I've been reflecting on recently because I'm thinking, I've done like 20 episodes now. Am I gonna get to like 150 episodes?
20
You know?
episodes, by the way. Congratulations. Huzzah!
Yeah,
I like to
yeah,
publicly acknowledge people who have any success whatsoever in podcasting because it's a long, lonely, hard road. So, congratulations on, I think you're at 22 or something. I think you said
yeah,
before. But anyway,
yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think I've just completely blanked on what what my
Oh,
answer
I
even
asked
was.
you, how do you know when you're done? What's the last thing? The
Oh, that's
downside
right.
of
Yeah,
doing what's the
yeah,
last one?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, yes. Well, thank you for reminding me. So, yeah, I think I've been thinking. Am I going to get to 150? Like, is this is this podcast going to be something that I'm going to still be doing in like 3, 4, 5 years? And I think it's a difficult question. And then if it's not something you want to do, when like if you do you
Right.
just stop now, like and save
Right
yourself
now.
if you're going to
Stop.
stop doing it eventually? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think for myself, like my podcast, like I've said, is early career focus, and I think perhaps in 5 years I'm not really going to be as much early career as I am now. Like I've been working for a year, so the podcast is really like it's almost a selfish thing
Yeah.
where it's I want people to give me career advice. And then hopefully that resonates with other people that are in a similar position to me. But I
Except I'm going to
so
push back on selfish. I don't think that's selfish. Selfish might be if you didn't publish them. You
yeah,
invited. I wonder how
okay,
far you could get inviting guests, telling them it's a podcast. I'm gonna publish any minute now. I just never have any intention of publishing it. Just use it for all
yeah.
the. That might be selfish, but no, I think sharing what you're doing, in my opinion, is clearly not selfish. You're putting in a ton of
Mhm.
work. But I interrupted you again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, I think you know. So yeah, like in 5 years, perhaps I'm not in the early career space anymore, and perhaps it's like growing my career in this
Mm,
format isn't going to be something that interests me as much as it does now. Like perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. But I think what would be a nice way to wrap it would be to create some kind of like an ebook or something like that to kind of condense a
yeah.
lot of the learnings into something, and then that would be a nice way to say like this is the end. Here's something that summarizes the whole journey, and now we're on to the next thing. And I don't, look, that's just an idea I have in my head, and I'm not really sure when I'll get to the point where I feel like, okay, I've kind of explored all the areas that I want to explore. Everything's kind of, yeah, everything's kind of discovered now. I think I can, I think I can teach someone how to have an early career, great story for
I think that
themselves.
reflects you're having a clear idea what you want the show to be. Like, if I
Mm.
know I want it to be about making cheesecake, don't know why I'm thinking about cheesecake. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
But I want it to be about making cheesecake. At some point, all right, that's enough. Like, I've done like 150 pieces of cheesecake. We can move on.
Mm.
So I think because you have such a clear, what strikes me as a clear purpose and you know what you're doing, you might maybe, hopefully, be able to tell when, yeah, okay, I've done enough. I've got my,
Mm.
80/20 out of it. But I think that's pretty astute. Uh, do you tell your coworkers that you're a podcaster? Is like, do you wear that on you, like I would say, wear your heart on your sleeve? Do you wear I'm a podcaster on your sleeve in your regular daily life?
Yeah, I do now. I think when I first started, I was initially a little bit skeptical because I wasn't sure, is this something you tell like people at work? If it's like, especially because mine's like quite closely related. Like it's, I'm talking about like work tips, so it's not like I'm
Yeah.
talking about a hobby that I have on the side. Um, so definitely I was like that, and then I even was would ask people like I remember going to HR and I was like, hey, I'm gonna do this thing, is this allowed? And what happens if I start like making some money from this? Like how? Because I had no idea about the rules. Like I know some companies you,
Yeah.
like the company kind of owns what you do
Non-competes
on the
or, yeah,
side,
right.
or
Intellectual
yeah.
property. Mhm.
Well, so even perhaps I was naive even going to them because I know some people would just kind of do it, and then they'll sort of worry about that stuff later. But I went like straight away. I haven't really recorded any episodes at that stage, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing. Is this allowed?" And they were like, yeah, like fill out this form or whatever. And it was all good, which was nice. But yeah, and once that sort of happened, and then now I talk about it more, like most of the other graduates that are the same place as me. Like we all, well, they all know what I'm
Mm.
doing. Like
Mm.
it's all. I did a big post on my LinkedIn, so most of my network on LinkedIn knows what
Is
I'm doing as
aware.
well. Um,
Has there been any interest from your employer? I know where you work, but we haven't said it yet, so we'll keep not saying it. Has there been any interest from
yeah.
your any interest from your employer to maybe create something internal for them, like not specifically the same kind of
Mm.
podcast, but maybe just random conversations with people who all work in the same place, so you get to meet people from 2 floors away, or now everything's remote and
Mm.
we don't get the chance. Any discussions or interest in podcasting within the organization that you're aware of?
Yeah, there are some things that exist already which are sort of like podcasts, but they're not really on the same, like not a typical podcast. There's some shows where they'll go like, "Hey, we're gonna like interview this person, speak about them," but that they might be like once every 3 months or something.
Hmm.
So it's not really, and it's like you kind of have to be there. There's no real recording afterwards. It's almost just like a live interview that's on Teams or whatever video call software
Hmm.
that you would use, but. Yeah, I think it would be really cool because I know there's things you can do now. You can have like your private podcast where you can
Yep.
have the RSS feed like privately, so you need to come from
Yeah, the
any.
company can control it, so
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about
exactly.
like can't say that. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's unlikely you're going to say like really confidential stuff in there anyway. So I guess the security doesn't have to be quite as tight. But I think the like something like that would be really cool, and I think a lot of organizations, especially given the distributed nature of things now, where perhaps you don't go to the office at all, and getting
Hmm.
to know your colleagues a little bit deeper is something that would be really cool. So far there hasn't been any interest in doing that, but I think certainly a lot of organizations could benefit from something like that because I think it's if you an like it's fairly low effort thing to do. You could have one
Yeah.
or two people that just chat to someone every week, and it's and it could be quite interesting. There's one thing actually we're doing at the moment which I just completely forgot about. We're actually starting this thing at work called I work at ANZ and it's called ANZ Radio, and so it's like it's. Is it a podcast? I don't know. We're basically interviewing like senior leaders, but it's much more of a let's not talk about work and let's ask you like what your favorite food is. you
What
know,
position do you play in football, right?
yeah. What's your favorite cheesecake flavor? Things like that. Uh,
Vanilla.
yeah. So yeah, things like that. Make it a bit more fun, which I think is really
Hmm.
cool. At the moment, we're only going to do like 3 episodes, and then we'll kind of see from there. But certainly, I think creating a private thing, interviewing just like a normal employee somewhere, and just seeing what
Hmm.
sort of it doesn't necessarily have to be a senior person that's like trying to show their soft side or anything like that.
Hmm.
I think something like that could be really cool and just get to know the workforce a little bit better.
Yeah. Is there a podcast out there that you would love to be a fly on the wall for? Like you want to go, either see them do the record or you want to hang out in the production room while they argue over how the episode gets put together. But like, you could I want to just be in the room. Like, do you have one
Mm.
of those in mind? Is that something that comes up?
Yeah, I think for me, Tim Ferriss has been a big inspiration and someone that I've learned a lot from. So he did an episode. I'm not sure how long ago it was now. It might have been towards the end of last year. He did like a breakdown of the way he podcasts and like what he uses. And I'm sure perhaps you've listened to this. I know a lot of like
I
if you have a
haven't listened
podcast.
to it. It's in the queue.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't,
But
you
if
know
you
what I
have a
mean? More
podcast,
toys.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would highly recommend listening to it because there's for me in my head there's a clear sort of before and after from listening to
Hmm.
that of like how I guess like when I started I had no real idea like you just kind of sit in the chair and you're like oh hey how's it going like let's have a chat but listening to him the kind of the way he does things I was like oh that's what that's how you make it like good that's what goes into good preparation and having good questions and things like that and having like things like a backup recording uh,
Yeah.
system, and all this stuff. I mean, he's maybe he goes into quite a bit of detail in that sort of stuff, which is maybe unique to him. But I think there are certainly some lessons and some great lessons that I picked up from him, not only in that episode, but I think throughout. all his episodes. Now that I have a sort of reference for the way he does things, and you can kind of hear that in other episodes that he does. So I think for him, he only obviously introduces, it speaks to pretty interesting guests as well. So
Sure.
I think he would certainly be up there. And I think like the classics like Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan as well, they're always interviewing like probably some of the most interesting people that you could want to speak to. So like obviously they would be right up there as well.
Terrific. All right, James, it was a pleasure. I know 20 minutes flies by, but thanks
Yeah.
so much for getting up a little bit early, I'm thinking, to join me from the other side. Both east, west, and north, south. Craig has fun with geography. I'm bad at
Yeah.
geography. But anyway, thanks for taking the time. It was a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you, and I wish you the best of luck and great things with your show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Craig. And I love what you're doing here with the podcasting community. I'm excited to see where it goes.